Hey there, in this video we're going to continue our look through this book here. This is the 1981 basic D&D book, Moldvay Basic BX, or I guess this is the B part of it, and kind of my journey. I mentioned in the last video, if you haven't seen that, well, you can probably watch that one after this one, that I learned this myself and my friend Steven. We learned this. We were about 9 years old. We picked these books up and we learned how to play ourselves. We didn't have anybody teach us how to play. I think that's often people talk about that. You need a DM to teach you and to get past on. I mean, we learned from reading the book, and I think there's a couple of great examples in here. There's a few examples actually in the book, but the example of combat, which is what I went over last time, and then the example of dungeon exploration really sets up. In my mind, like the way that OSR or these old school games were played by a lot of people, and us included, because we use this combat example. So I'm going to go through. It's a little bit more than a page here in the basic book. If you have your basic book, you can read along. It's page B59 is where it starts. Let me switch over here so you guys can see my screen. So I just had the PDF open. By the way, you can get this PDF. I guess I'll put a link in the description. You can get this on DriveThruRPG. It's not very expensive. And well worth it, in my opinion. There's also OSE, right, which I think a lot of people maybe are probably looking at right now, Old School Essentials, which is Gavin Norman put together this amazing compilation basically of the rules of this book and then also the expert book in a really concise, really easy to use at the table way, and beautiful design. But it doesn't have any of this stuff in it. Like, this to me is the meat of this system. I think if you already are familiar with the OSR stuff and you're already playing those games and you just want the rules, that's a great way to go. And it's probably worth getting eventually anyways, because just even for the PDF, because it's very easy to find stuff in it. But for the learning and for the flavor, I like the original books. And I still, even though I have the OSE book, I have the big hardcover. It's beautiful. I still pull out my original books and I read them, and it really does direct how I look at the game. So let's just go through this, and I will editorialize as we go. So just in case you're unfamiliar with the system. So let's see, we start. Now, by the way, this gets criticized sometimes because this is actually in the storyline. This happens before the other example, which is earlier in the book. I think they do that for a couple of reasons. One of which makes a lot of sense to me, is that that combat example happens right after combat's explained, and that's one of the early things in the book that they explain, because that's more player facing. This comes down to, even though obviously the players are exploring the dungeon, this is kind of in the build a dungeon section. So I think it's a good place for it to be, and it never bothered me that it was here. But for those people, for some reason, that's a common criticism that people have. Weird. Anyways. All right, so Sample Dungeon Expedition. Here we go, in 1981. The situation. This party includes 4 second-level characters and a first-level dwarf. Morgan Ironwolf, a female fighter, the Collar. So the Collar, which I'll explain again, is in basic D&D in the way that it's supposed to be played. And I actually believe people still play this way. They just don't call it this because they get very weird about the Collar. I've heard a lot of negative things. Essentially, the Collar is the person that says what the party's doing. They generally, I think in this example, maybe it's a little bit more than most people do, but like when I'm running, usually one person directs the party until they get to a point where somebody really wants to do something different. So that's basically what the Collar does. The Collar's like, we go left, we go right. This person's up front, they're going to light a torch. Yeah, anybody can say I'm going to light a torch, but it just makes life easier, especially. What you'll find about basic D&D is it's very structured. And of course, you can use as much or as little as you need, but I think because it's very structured, it's very easy to learn, especially when you're young or you've never done any kind of RPGs before, because you can just follow the structure until it becomes second nature, and then it becomes just loose. So anyways, she's the Collar, so you're going to see Morgan talking a lot. And what's important, it actually even explains it here, so I will finish reading. Silverleaf is also in the group. He's an elf. Also, if you don't realize this, in basic D&D, elf, dwarf, and halfling are all classes. It's a races class. An elf is like a fighter magic user, basically, and a dwarf is like a fighter. Frederick, the dwarf. There's also Sister Rebecca, who is a cleric, and Black Dougal, the thief. No rogues yet. Well, I think rogue is one of the titles of thief. Anyways, after equipping these themselves, these characters have journeyed to the Haunted Keep. That's the sample dungeon that they made here. and discover the trapdoor in room 4 leading to the second level. As caller, Morgan relays the party's action to the DM after the characters decide what they want to do. I think this is what people don't understand about the caller. Like in this example, Morgan is just going to be saying, these people do this. It's implied that the other players are saying, my character's doing this, and then Morgan's just relaying that information to the DM. So don't feel like when I'm reading this that Morgan's like taking control of everybody's character. She's not really doing that. So, anyways, DM, having killed the hobgoblins, you open the trap door and find a set of stairs going down to the south. Morgan, we're going down the stairs, right? DM, after 30 feet, you reach a round landing with 2 sets of stairs. One goes down to the east, the other goes down to the west. Morgan, Frederick looks down the east staircase, Silverleaf looks down the west one. What do they see? Okay, why is she doing this? Because, I mean, clearly, and the DM's about to say it, the party's torches mess up obviously the party has torches because they're inside the building already, so they didn't talk about lighting torches. With Infravision, unlike Dark Vision, let's say in later editions, Infravision is basically kind of heat sensing vision, so it allows you to see in the dark, essentially. What would happen is these two characters, the elf and the dwarf, can both have it, so it's a special ability. They're going to go slightly ahead of the party and look down, right? They're going to see if they see anything moving down there because they have the Infravision. The rest of the party is going to stay back with their torches. Temporarily, anyways. We're exploring, right? We're not bumbling ahead. We're looking at our options before we make a choice. DM. DM. The party's torches mess up their Infravision, of course, he says, so they can only see 20 or 30 feet, you know. DM's explaining, this is something that's important, I say this a lot. Whenever you're making a change or whatever, you know, you can just say this is the reason why, is because, you know, it's reasonable, right? The west stairs go down 10 feet and turn sharply south. So obviously they don't matter. The east stairs go down at least 30 feet, but of course their vision is only going about that far. Also, Fred smells a rank, musty odor coming up from below. Describe not just the dimensions. Describe smells. Describe, any kind of airflow that happens. You want to describe lighting. I mean, clearly it's dark in here. These are all ways that you want to describe and put the people into the scene, right? He can smell there's something down there. You can't see it, but there's something nasty down there. So Morgan says, anyone want to go down the east stairs? Of course not. Okay, we're going to go down the west stairs. They don't want to go down the east stairs. It's very dangerous, right? Why don't I go down the other way? Remember, in this game, it's all about getting the treasure and getting out. You're getting out alive. You don't want to fight things if you don't have to. So you go 10 feet down the west stairs. It turns south 20 feet. 30 feet down, the stairs end, and you step into a 20-foot wide corridor that goes east and west. You see a door 10 feet up to the west corridor on the north wall. Rebecca jumps in, even though she's not the caller. She can still ask the DM a question, right? She's mapping, it says. That was the north wall? The DM, yes. The door is in the north wall. Okay. What this is showing us here is, and something that maybe a lot of people don't do as much now, and actually I've been doing a lot of stuff on Roll20, so I've just been doing it, is back in the day, there was somebody who was making a map. And making the map is not necessarily a chore. It can actually be fun. I know that I've had some players that at first are kind of like, but then they kind of enjoy doing it. Because you can remember that this is all about problem solving. And by drawing your map, or having a map versus just in your head kind of remembering it, you'll know which ways you haven't gone. You'll see weird spots. You'll be like, hold on, why is there a big gap there or whatever? And you can find secret doors. I mean, many times as a player, I have discovered secret doors and knew that there was a secret door there because there was just a big empty space, and you were like, there's got to be a secret door here. Like, why is this corridor like this, you know? So mapping is super important. It's kind of fun. One thing I do, which I'll kind of throw in as a little thing, is a lot of times if I'm running like a mega dungeon, so mapping's important, I will, whoever does the mapping, I will give them a little bonus and experience points for doing it. So they're doing a little extra work that gets some experience points. It's always good to sweeten the pot a little bit, as I say. Anyways, the door's on the north wall. Morgan, we're going to go to the door. Silverleaf, Black Dougal, and I will listen. Okay, because remember, anybody can listen at a door. Now, I'm not sure why Morgan listens. Maybe she just feels like it. Elves, dwarves, and thieves have better chances of listening. So definitely Silverleaf and Black Dougal make sense. I'm not exactly sure why Morgan listens. Maybe that's just what they decided. So they listen at the door. DM says, as you step into the corridor, breathe from the west, make your torches flicker. Rebecca, we're chiming in again. Is it strong enough to put them out? DM, no, chuckling, not yet. Again, setting mood, setting tension, very simple stuff. This is a dungeon exploration. If you treat the game as if it's just move from one location with nothing happening to a fight, then move to the next fight, to move to the next fight, it's a completely different game to play it that way. To play it where they're actually in there, they smell things and the wind's blowing, there's things going on. This makes it feel like you're really exploring. It's a game of exploration. Okay, so let's see. They're going to listen at the door, which I just did. All right, so DM rolls for it. DM rolls for listen checks because this avoids that issue that I think you have a lot of times in completely fair player-facing things, where somebody does like a whatever the check would be in I can't remember 9-5, but like they always want a perception, like they'd want to roll their own check because it's plays like to roll their own check. They're going to know when they roll a 1. I mean, I know they're not supposed to know, but this way the DM rolls it. It's like you don't know. There's no room where you could be a little bit confused, any meta. So I actually like that. Even in when I run other editions, I ask the person their score and I roll it. Anyways, they listen. They don't hear anything. Again, since they didn't roll it, they don't know if they didn't hear anything because there's nothing there, or they didn't hear anything because it was too quiet, or they didn't hear anything because it just wasn't making any noise. They don't know, so they have to make a decision, and what they decide, because it says Morgan, after discussing with the others, will leave the door and go down the passage. So they're just going to leave that door there. Right now, they don't know there's anything in there or not. They're just going to leave it. DM. After 30 feet, there's a side passage to the south, 10 feet wide. The main corridor continues west. You notice the breeze is stronger, and your torches are beginning to flicker even more. We're building tension. They're getting deeper in the dungeon. They're getting towards something because the wind is blowing more, so there's something happening here, right? Frederick says, I don't like this. That was my dwarf voice. Dougal, who's of course the thief, well, you've got infravision, Morgan just tells the DM, we'll take the side passage. So you've got a little role play going on, right? Again, dungeon exploration doesn't mean there's no role play. I think sometimes people think that it's like you go to a tavern, you role play with the tavern people, and then like you just roll dice as you walk through the dungeon and don't talk about anything and just do checks, and then you go and you fight stuff. All of this is role play. It's all part of the game. Anyways, DM. Okay, after 50 feet, you find doors to the east and the west. The passage continues south. Morgan says, Silverleaf, Fred, and Black Dougal will listen at the west door. Which, mechanically makes more sense because they all have a better chance of listening. DM rolls again. Black Dougal hears muttering voices. Okay, now they hear something at this door. Dougal. See? Again, this is where I think that I feel like I'm defending the caller for some reason. But this is, again, even though there's a caller, he's running his character. So he says, do I understand them? I speak, and he tells the DM. This is always good as a player. Give the DM the information. Don't make them probe it from you, right? I speak Common, Orc, Goblin, Elvish. So he says what languages he speaks. Dougal's pretty smart, man. He speaks a lot of languages. DM, after deciding on a chance that Dougal will recognize the Goblin language through the heavy door and then rolling. So the DM thinks. He doesn't just go, okay, there's goblins there, so yes. He goes, it's a heavy door. Let me see. Maybe there's a chance. And whatever. It doesn't even say what the chance is. They leave it open. And I think they do that on purpose, right? They don't want you to feel like, oh, the example said it's a 2 in 6 chance. No, just whatever the DM thought was appropriate with that door, in that situation, with the wind. But anyways, he rolls and he doesn't think, no, the voices aren't loud enough. You can't tell. So Morgan says, we're getting ready for combat. Fred and I will force the door. Because remember that in the BX system, or maybe you're learning it, in the BX system, a lot of doors are stuck. And if a door is stuck, you need to make an open doors check, which is based on your strength. And if you don't, then basically you slam into the door, it doesn't open. Normally, I would let people just try it over and over again, but every time they slam into the door, they're making noise. These guys know there's somebody on the other side. So they're not just going to have one person try to open the door, they're going to have two. That way they have 2 chances to do it. So the DM could do that a lot of different ways. I've done it a lot of different ways. It doesn't say that, but it's just implied you can do what you want, right? You can either both have them roll, or you could add a bonus to the one roll. It depends on what's happening. Anyways. Okay, so... I think I'm blocking that part, sorry. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so he doesn't hear it. They get ready for combat. Fred and Morgan force the door open. Dougal, I'll guard the rear. He's a thief. Okay, the party is set with Black Dougal guarding the rear. So DM restates what everybody just said, so it's clear, so there's no confusion. Rolling to see if the door is forced. It opens. You see half a dozen goblins. Clearly they recognize the goblins. I mean, Dougal speaks the goblin language, and Frederick being a dwarf, dwarves hate goblins in BX. And, of course, he yells, "Let me at him!" So the DM says, well, they can't be surprised. I mean, you can't be surprised because clearly you heard them, right? But they can. So he rolls to see if the goblins are surprised. Okay. No. Roll for initiative. Fred rolls a 2. I guess, Morgan is speaking here, but I'm assuming that, because it's a group initiative, so they probably let Fred roll because he's the one that's charging in there, right? DM rolling, the goblins have initiative. Now, let me just point this out. So the goblins have initiative. Rolling reactions for the goblins. They must have heard you, Fred. They charge, yelling, "Kill the dwarf." Chop them to hamburger. Now, you might be saying, well, if you watch the other video, well, you said that, the idea here was that fighting wouldn't always happen. But you got a few things going on here. Number one, the DM did roll a check, and maybe he got a 2, or at least a very low number. Number 2, if you look up goblins, let's see, monsters. Actually, if you look up dwarves, we'll do dwarves first because they're first alphabetically. If we look at the dwarf, I mean, granted this is the monster dwarf, but it's still dwarves. It's monster dwarfs. Dwarves hate goblins and will usually attack them on sight. So the DM is probably modifying the role, or the player character knows that, so they're like, I'm attacking the goblins. Even though in the other case they tried to negotiate. Also, I think the other thing that's different here is that in the other case there was way more hobgoblins, and hobgoblins are tougher than goblins. So I think that the party was right to maybe charge in. And finally, if you look right here, I can find my mouse. There it is. Goblins hate dwarfs and will attack them on sight. So they probably know that. I mean, clearly they've encountered goblins before and know enough about goblins to know that the goblins are going to probably attack. I mean, even though it says that, the DM, he still rolled a check, and they attack, basically. So they kill the dwarf, chop them to hamburger. Combat is now resolved. Morale check taken. The goblins fight until they are dead. It's now time to check for wandering monsters, because one thing that you have to remember, and again, comes into the thing being very systematic in BX, is that no matter, even if this was 2 rounds of combat, which is like 20 seconds, whenever there's a combat, it's always assumed that it takes 1 full turn, which is 10 minutes. The reason for that is it's like the cleaning up, the resting after, the putting away your weapons, whatever it might be you're doing. That's all kind of considered, I guess, or it's just to make life easier. So because they spend a turn outside the door, and then they spend a turn fighting, every 2 turns you roll for wandering monsters, so the DM's rolling for wandering monsters. But no wandering monsters, thankfully. Okay. What is Morgan? What does this room look like? Because remember, the DM didn't go, this room looks like this, blah, blah, and you see this and you see that, because there was freaking goblins and they were attacking them. Like, they boom, right into the combat because they were being attacked. Remember that that makes it more exciting. And I will say this about old school modules, it used to make me, like when I run them now, even, it's like, a lot of times they put the monster at the end of the entry, and I guess that's so it's easier to, like, when you're going back to the stats, it's easier to find it. But, so unless you really know your module well, so you should know this, or mark up your modules, make sure you know if there's a monster in the room. Because if there's a monster in the room, that should take precedence over anything, But, if there's something major in the room that's going to show up, that should take precedence. Then you describe the room once that's dealt with, which is what they did here. Okay, so the room is 6-sided, 30 foot on a side, and 20 foot high. That's pretty tall ceilings. The door you came in is the only one you see. There's nothing unusual about the floor or ceiling. Besides the bodies of the goblins, there's a wooden box along the northeast wall and a pile of old rags in the north corner. So now they're going to spread out, right? Morgan. Silverleaf is checking for secret doors because elves are very good at that. Fred is looking for traps because room traps, as they're called in BX, dwarves are very good at that. Black Dougal is examining the box, right? Because he's a thief, so he can deal with treasure traps. Sister Rebecca is guarding the door because you don't want to just run in the room and pay. Because remember, wandering monsters are a major thing. So Sister Rebecca's hanging out by the door. And Morgan is prodding the rags with her sword for any movement. So, she's looking at these rags as a potential monster that could be in there. So that's probably why she's doing it herself and not sending, let's say, Sister Rebecca, who's maybe not as much of a fighter as she is. Morgan Iron was kind of badass. So the DM, after rolling appropriate checks. Silverleaf notices that one of the stone blocks on the southwest wall is slightly discolored. Fred does not see any traps. The box is the size of a small trunk. It's latched but not locked. Morgan, nothing moves in the pile of rags. So now Frederick says, this is like a little funny interlude here, which I think is important. And again, it gives you a realistic feel to what it might be like at the table. Frederick says, I want to have a look at that block, Silverleaf. So then Morgan, as the caller, is like, she's kind of lost control here for a second because everybody's spread out. So she's like, Fred examines the block. And then Fred's like, for traps. And then she's like, sorry, Fred examines it for traps, right? So it's like this little like back and forth, which is very realistic when you're playing like this. Then Dougal, skipping the whole caller protocol, just says directly to the DM, I'm looking for traps in the box too. Okay? DM rolling for Fred, even though the block is not trapped. Again, you want to keep the mystery. Even though you know there's no trap there, you still roll, right? Just like on the other doors where they didn't hear anything, there might have been nothing back there, but you still roll. The DM also rolls for Dougal's find traps ability. The roll indicates that Dougal has failed to find the poisoned needle in the latch. And says, neither of you finds a trap. Frederick. Now again, because the DM is rolling, Dougal doesn't know that they like critically failed that roll, or whatever you might call it in a modern game. So he doesn't know if he just doesn't know. The player doesn't know, which I think is a big difference between the character not knowing. Anyways, that's just me personally. And it's a big part of OSR play in my mind. All right, so Frederick, I'm pushing, pulling, and trying to twist the block. So you see now we're in like this moment where everybody's doing a lot of independent stuff. The caller has kind of stepped back, and people are just doing their own thing, and that's fine. That's how it works. So Frederick is explaining. He's explaining what he's doing. He's not saying. Remember, Silverleaf was looking for secret doors and found a discolored brick. The DM didn't go, you found a secret door. He said, you found a discolored brick. Now they got to figure out what to do with it. So they're interacting with their environment. Frederick is pushing, pulling, trying to twist the block. He's thinking, what would you do if it was a trap door there, right? DM says, when you push it, a secret door opens in the west section of the southwest wall. You see a 5-foot wide corridor that goes south for 30 feet and ends in a door. Aha. Morgan. Fred and Silverleaf will guard the secret door, because again, they just opened a secret door. Who knows what could come through there now? It's another way somebody could come into this room. So, stay there, guys. Guard the door, right? Black Dougal will open the box. I'll search through the rags. Anything that looks like a cloak or boots. This is actually kind of funny, because clearly she knows about the elven cloak and boots. And this falls into that category that, people might call that metagaming. Would your character know that that magic item exists? I feel like the BX is much looser with that kind of stuff. It was expected that everybody read this whole book. It's like it tells you, even from player or DM, to read from front to back. Everybody DM'd, everybody played. There were only so many magic items. People knew about them. I don't think that's metagaming. I think it's totally reasonable. Because why else would you wear some weird cloak in a dungeon unless you thought that it could be magical, right? Anyways, Black Dougal, you find out that you missed a tiny discolored needle in the latch. Roll a saving throw versus poison, please. Dougal rolling. Missed it. Black Dougal gasps. Poison. And falls to the floor. He looks dead. I mentioned this in the other example of play too, that somebody died. And I think that whenever they do these examples, people die, and I do think that sets a motivator. It's like if you're learning to play this game for the first time with nobody telling you anything, and you read these examples, you would realize this is deadly, and a lot of things can kill me, and I need to be careful. It's a much different play style, much different feel than a game where you don't have that described to you in the beginning. Like, I wish that there was examples of plays in more modern games, like 5e, where like one of the PCs goes down. I mean, why not? It can happen, right? And it sets expectations. Okay, so anyways, he drops. There was save or die poison, just because you don't realize that back then. So you didn't save for poison, a lot of times you died. I mean, honestly, he was a second level thief, so even if it was some damage from the poison, he probably might have died anyways, because thieves have very few hit points. Okay, so he's dead. So Frederick makes the only possible move that you can make when your comrade has just died. Frederick, I'm grabbing his pack to carry treasure in. And there you go, right? Frederick does not. I mentioned this in the other video. That's why I wasn't so upset. I'm not going to say anything just because you haven't seen the other video. Rebecca, who is the cleric, I'm giving Black Dougal the last rites of my church. She's a cleric, right? DM, okay, meanwhile, Fred, you find the box is full of silver. Perhaps 2,000 pieces. That's a lot of silver. Morgan, you do find a pair of old boots, but nothing like a cloak. Morgan. Fred will dump the silver and look for hidden compartments in the box, right? You don't just go, oh, silver, and take it. You even got to think about it, right? Also, the other thing I would say about that, too, which he doesn't really get into here, is that, I mean, I doubt there'd be 2 traps in the box, but you never can tell. Sometimes there's things in boxes, snakes, whatever. I mean, there could be anything in there. So dumping all the silver on the ground, it's going to take a little bit more time to pick it up, probably, but it'll save you if there's something in there or something under the box. So they dump it over. But what he does find is he finds a hidden compartment in the bottom of the box. All right. Oh no, he's looking for a hidden compartment. She's gonna try on the boots to see if I move silently, right? Because she knows. She says it could be a pair of elven boots, right? She knows about this magic item. She's gonna test. She's gonna try to see what it is. There's none of this like go out of play and sit around and do some magic spell. You want to know what a magic item is? You gotta try it on. But if you're gonna have that kind of play style, then you have to allow for the players to meta a bit so they understand that there are magic items to try on. So anyways, she puts on the boots. DM rolls another wandering monster check because they're spending time in here, right? Fred finds a false bottom in the box. It contains, didn't roll for it, right? He was looking for it. It was there. It contains another smaller box carved of ivy that holds 2 gold bracelets set with jade. Frederick, how valuable do they look? DM, you think the jewel case is worth 100 gold pieces and each bracelet is worth 600 gold pieces. Morgan seems to be moving very quietly. Right? DM didn't go, yeah, they're elven boots, but she's not making any sound, right? They're elven boots. Also, by doing that extra step and checking for the secret thing, they got 1,300 gold pieces worth of between the box and the jewels. 1,300 gold pieces, where the 2,000 silver is only equivalent to, I believe in BX it's 10 to a gold, so it's only equivalent to 200 gold pieces. And remember that you get 1 experience point per gold piece. So that was 6 times the amount of experience points in that small item. This teaches you, look for things, hidden spots, because gems and small items can be very valuable. Okay, so Morgan says, great. Yeah, she's excited. I'll put the case and jewels in my pack and then watch the door as the others turns filling their packs with silver. I mean, they're not going to leave the silver, clearly. If it was copper, maybe they'd leave it. Frederick, I'll dump out Dougal's pack and fill it with coins. He's on that pack, man. Dougal's been eyeballing that backpack ever since they started adventuring together. No, Frederick's been behind the backpack, I should say, ever since they've been starting adventuring together. I don't know. I don't know why that cracks me up, but it just does. DM, okay, loading will take 4 turns. So he's telling him that. He doesn't just go, okay, and then roll a bunch of things. He tells them that. At that moment, probably the players are like, oh, really? Well, no, forget it. We're going to move. That would have been fine. You're letting them know what's going on. DM makes wandering monster checks, probably 2 more. As the party finishes loading, a large party of bandits approaches. Since Morgan is watching the door, the DM gives a very high chance that the bandits will be heard. And he says, as you finish loading, Morgan, here's the tramp of many booted feet coming from the north. It's getting louder. Morgan, well, okay, so they're hearing many booted feet, right? They've just recovered a bunch of treasure. They lost one of their party members. Morgan's like, we'll beat a hasty retreat to that secret door. You know, she figures they can get in there and hide, right? Fred will go first, then me. Silverleaf is next, and Sister Rebecca will bring up the rear. She'll spike the door shut behind us. Right? That's why you get those iron spikes and hammer. You gotta spike those doors shut to make it harder for them to come through the door. Even if they find the secret door, they're gonna have to force it open. Okay. Frederick, though, with the heart of gold after he took Dougal's backpack. Before we do, I grab Dougal's body. We can't leave him behind. Thanks, Frederick. DM, okay, as you reach the end of the passage, you hear a cry of discovery and a babble of voices from the room behind you. Black Dougal's tools and rations have been discovered. Remember, Frederick dumped that stuff out on the ground, and they forgot about it. Pay attention to what you're doing. They thought they were being slick. They took Black Dougal with them. They went through the secret door so they wouldn't be discovered, but they left the stuff on the ground. So Morgan's like, what? Didn't anyone bring his stuff along? And then everybody says all, no, right? So they're all like, shucks. Morgan, nuts. We're going to have to be more careful from here on, gang. Anyhow, Fred will listen at the door. I have my bow ready. DM rolling. You don't hear anything, Fred. Fred forces the door open. DM rolling. It opens. You see a square room on 30 foot on a side, 20 foot high. Your door is on the west section of the north wall. You don't see any other exits. The room appears to be empty. Rebecca, what about behind us? Right? Because remember, those bandits came into the room. The voices have died down, and you don't hear anything. So at this point, right, they're in this. They've opened up into this other smaller room that doesn't appear to have any way out of it. The bandits, or whoever, I mean, they don't know they're bandits, but whoever the enemy is that approached have left, right? The other room, presumably. So they could go back, but she's not going to do that right away. I mean, they're pushing forward, right? Morgan, we'll search through them very carefully, taking at least 2 turns. Whenever you're doing a search, it takes 1 turn. So she's basically saying we'll search twice. You know, we'll do it twice. So we'll allow ourselves more time to be more thorough, and aka give me 2 rolls. But knowing that that's going to jeopardize and make an immediate need for a roll for a wandering monster check, because you roll them every 2 turns. So again, you're gambling, right? It's risk versus reward. They need to find a way out of here. She's also probably thinking, well, if anything does come, we have the door covered. Silverleaf and Sister Rebecca are looking for secret doors. Fred is looking for shifting walls. I'm guarding the rear. Unfortunately, there's no more Black Dougal. DM rolling for wandering monsters. Okay, you search for 2 turns. You don't find anything. But something finds you. A secret door that Silverleaf and Sister Rebecca didn't find in the south wall opens, and 2 hobgoblins stroll in. And that says, at this point, the time scale shifts from turns to rounds, and the encounters in the example of combat, page B28. Okay? So this jumps now to that other example that we did in the other video. Basically, it's now they fight the hobgoblins, and you get to learn all that. Of course, you've already read that, but you know, whenever I read this, I always immediately go back and read that one again. Just, you know, it gets you in that mindset because this is the whole story, right? And what's interesting here is that we learn a lot about the procedure here, but also about that little bit of role play and things that might seem really dry. I think one of my biggest issues as somebody who plays old school games with people who have never played before but then criticize them when they just read the books is that they'll call out things like the collar and certain other things, the mapper, and they'll be like, oh, that's stupid, or it doesn't make any sense, and no, people can't role play. Of course you can, right? The collar is just there for organization. BX is very, very structured. And the more you play, the less it feels structured, though, because once you kind of internalize that structure, you're just doing it. And you actually see that progress here. In the beginning, it feels very, but then by the end, everybody's kind of saying what they're doing and things going a lot smoother. You see, it just kind of works that way. And I actually think that's why this is a brilliantly written example, because it does all that without actually saying it. And now, I'm actually considering reading through most of this book. If you guys are interested, let me know. I got good feedback on the other video. Let me know if you're interested in that. At the very least, I might just do the Dungeon Mastering as Fine Art section, which is this next part. I mean, that's basically, it's 2 pages. This is essentially tips for the DM, which I do think are super useful. You know, DM tips are always good no matter what system you're in. And I think that the tips they use here are actually very good, clearly, because this is the system I learned on. It's basically how I play. There's a few things that I think are a little questionable. So I might want to give a little as to exactly how I would deal with this today. Because, of course, obviously, well, I'm older. I'm not sure if I'm much more mature than I was when I was 9. But, you know, I think some of the stuff I would do a little bit differently than what they say here. Because remember that old school style doesn't mean you have to stick to everything that everybody did back then. But it's good to know what was done and kind of the reasons for it, I guess is the best way for me to say it, so that you can understand what you might want to use and what you might not want to use from those systems. So all that being said, if you are interested in watching play, every Monday and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, I'm running games. Friday is an ongoing Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerer's Hyboria campaign. Monday, we just finished Winter's Daughter, which was in BX. We're going to bring that back in a bit, but I'm going to be changing over to playing Coriolis on Monday. So if you're interested in, it's kind of a, if you don't know about Coriolis, I guess it's a sci-fi game. Sci-fantasy maybe is more like what it is. It's kind of Arabian Nights in space is the way they bill it. It's a pretty fun game, so join us on Monday nights for that if you're interested, and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you next time.